Our lives are turning out to be more unnatural, exhausting, and routine on account of technology. On account of large-scale technology and industrialization, our spiritual and mental well-being is on the verge of collapse. Our planet faces the same destiny. These issues don't see left or right, either liberal or conservative. The issues that industrialization has caused us will inevitably plague society until it crumbles. The solution was to blow it all up. Through violence, man can return to his ordinary way of life. That was the way of thinking of Ted Kaczynski.
Kaczynski had spent 2 months in a Montana jail, charged only with possessing bomb components.
While trying to spark a revolution, Ted sent bombs secretly through the mail to individuals he believed were responsible for a piece of the continuous industrial and technological development, like publicizing leaders, wood industry workers, and PC researchers. During the time he spent carrying out these bombings, Ted wrote a manifesto, which examines and makes predictions about the eventual fate of mankind. Large numbers of these predictions turned out to be true in today's age. Ted was not just some crazy individual. All through his life, he showed high levels of intelligence and insight time and time again. But why would he feel the need to get back at the world? All through his entire life, Ted Kaczynski was academically enthusiastic. He avoided the 6th and 11th grades. He graduated secondary school at age 15 and started school at Harvard at 16. At 20, he graduated in financial matters. But nevertheless, this is somewhat when Ted's life began to go to pieces. Ted took part in a Harvard study on mind control techniques. Members of this review were informed that they would write individual essays about their goals and aspirations and then engage in intellectual conversation with other students. However, in reality, the expositions were given to a stranger who would use them to verbally mistreat the respective creators of each essay. The students were given seriously private judgment and demeaning comments about their most secret desires once a week, and their brains were monitored the entire time. This investigation took 3 years to complete. Later, Ted said it had no impact on his way of life. One might be inclined to trust him given his intellect, but who can say for sure? Some hold the belief that Ted Kaczynski was radicalized as a 16-year-old at Harvard when he was used as a human guinea pig for the CIA's Project MK-Ultra. Kaczynski decided to undergo a sex change in 1966 after having dreams about becoming a woman. Ted made a plan to discuss this idea with a therapist, but he changed his mind while he was sitting in the chair. After leaving, Ted was horrified by his, quote, sexual dreams and declared that he had to kill the therapist in a way that would result in him not being caught so he could kill others as well. Ted did not kill his therapist, but he claimed in the aftermath that the incident had a profound impact on his life. He wrote that, inspired by a new sense of confidence, he emerged from this problem like a phoenix from the ashes. Ted left his job as a school teacher after the encounter with the specialist and moved to a secluded cabin in a Montana forest. There, he lived without power or running water and took on some temporary jobs while getting huge monetary help from his family. His goal was to ultimately become completely independent. His main sources of food were wild hares and cultivated plants. It was here in Montana that Ted developed a strong eco-anxiety.
There is another way to live, and you don't have to live the way we do in this system. I've been against technology ever since 1962. My last year at Harvard, 1962, was the year when I definitely decided I was against technology.
On one occasion in Montana, Ted was on one of his climbs through the forest around his cabin. When he arrived at his final destination, a cliff near a waterfall, he saw that a road had been built straight through it. Ted would later describe this situation as follows: "You have no idea how angry I was. Starting from that point forward, I made the decision to work toward restoring the framework rather than attempting to acquire new wild abilities." Revenge. Ted certainly delivered on his promise. On one occasion, someone built a vacation home within a mile of his cabin. Ted broke into the house and vandalized it. He also destroyed the bikes and snowmobiles that the mortgage holders had been using to travel through the forest. On various occasions, Ted destroyed innovations that he considered an attack on the natural way of life. He set a tractor on fire and even filled the snowmobile's fuel tanks with sugar. Ted destroyed the truck of a development laborer that he found in the forest. Nevertheless, This was modest in comparison to his now infamous bombings. Kaczynski anonymously delivered a series of bombs that resulted in the deaths of 3 people and injuries to 23 others between the years of 1978 and 1995. Ted sent bombs to people he considered to be soldiers for the development of technology. The FBI assembled a team of 150 agents in 1979 for the Unabomber investigation, which was the codename given in reference to the college and the aircraft bombing targets. The majority of these efforts proved to be ineffective. The FBI made very little progress in identifying their Unabomber over a period of about 20 years. It was obvious that Ted thought incredibly carefully about how to leave no evidence. He regularly left subtle, deceptive clues in the bundles. Quite a few of the bombs had fingerprints on them that had nothing to do with Ted. Ted sent his manifesto, Industrial Society and Its Future, to a few news organizations in 1995 while he was carrying out his bombings. He asked that it be published in the press. Ted said that if his requests were granted, he would put an end to the bombings. Ted outlined his philosophy and his inspiration for his bombings in his manifesto. Ted's manifesto opens with what is essentially his proposition. The Industrial Revolution and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race. Kaczynski argued that we have created a world in which humans are not developed to live. Ted clarifies this idea in 35,000 words and offers nature as a solution in contrast to the modernization plaguing society. Ted argues that technology is a system that uses humans. The stronger that technology makes society, the fewer freedoms there are. Clinical depression is on the rise. The cultural factors that contribute to this pandemic are completely ignored. All things considered, people are given medication that enables them to endure circumstances that they would typically find intolerable. According to Ted, innovation appeared to be completely helpful at first. Broadcast communications, for example. What sane person could oppose these comforts? Kaczynski argued that these innovations would integrate themselves into our lives so deeply that they would destroy people's ability to be flexible. For instance, Kaczynski focused on the car. Gradually, our general public became accustomed to the view of vehicles. Urban areas were constructed with car ownership in mind. Right now, having a vehicle is practically a requirement, so you are then expected to do all that involves attempting to pay for one, enlisting, getting taught on the utilization of a vehicle, and so forth. There are assigned sidewalks, and surprisingly, the passerby is continually in danger of winding up dead by a careless driver. People who do not own cars rely on public transportation, which also limits their opportunity for advancement. You should go where the transport goes, you should go where the train goes, and so forth. Ted acknowledges that we do in fact live in a supposedly free society, but he maintains that our freedom only extends to the point that it does not interfere with the functioning of the system. The point at which behavior is deemed unacceptable depends on whether it violates legal, ethical, or social norms. In order to bring about society's eventual collapse, Kaczynski proposes causing stress and instability within it. He argues that doing this requires reaching out to sub-societies like ghettos and criminal organizations because they pose a threat to the system's total control. He suggests that revolution be preferred over reform because reform is always constrained by the worry of unpleasant consequences if changes go too far. However, once a society develops a burning desire for revolution, its citizens will endure any hardship for the sake of their revolution. His vision of a successful revolution is for human society to be returned to its pre-industrial state, using only simple technology like water wheels. Technology and factories ought to be systematically destroyed. He thinks that despite the hardship brought on by such a revolution, it is still far preferable to the other options, which include either the system continuing to advance or collapsing under the weight of its own overconsumption and environmental catastrophe, which simply involves living a long but empty and purposeless life. Additionally, Ted's manifesto has come under criticism. Reading glasses, music recordings, and sewers are a few technological innovations that appear to enhance human existence and add some quality to it. But Kaczynski completely avoids addressing these positive aspects of technology. Likewise, his argument that modern man has no ability to control pollution and other things outside of his control doesn't really hold up in comparison to primitive man, who would likewise have many things outside of his control, such as disease and basic security. Ted counters this by stating that the primitive man can handle these issues stoically, but it is not entirely clear as to why the modern man can't also accept the problems out of their control stoically. Ted felt it absolutely necessary to kill for the efficiency of his message. Kaczynski's sadistic and sociopathic disregard for the lives of innocent people should make anyone wary of his idealism. Despite his coherent and prophetic critique of late-stage capitalism, we should not mistake his personal anger towards the system, which evidently destroyed his soul through isolation and experimentation, for worthy philosophical discourse. Keep in mind that although it's easy to focus solely on the perpetrator of a crime, try as well to remember the victims and their families who suffered a devastating loss. Nonetheless, thanks for watching this episode of Horror Vault.